What's up, my Canadian cousins? How are you guys today? I am also going to welcome on this video my American brothers and sisters, whom I truly hope are going to see this. Most of my viewers are Canadian, but I do get the smattering of American viewers every now and again. And there are some things I could do when I'm posting this video and keywords I use in tag words and such to try to get this to American audiences. And so I'm going to try to. Why? Because as my Canadian viewers know, I've been very disturbed about our soon-to-be president's hostility towards Canada with respect to tariffs, with respect to the threats, whether joking or not joking, to put economic pressure on Canada to have it join the United States, which, as Canada's Prime Minister said in a tweet yesterday, there's not a snowball's chance in hell that that's going to happen. And if you know Canadians, you know that that's true. But what I really wanted to do right now is to showcase the fact that every single American president, from the war years, FDR, to Joe Biden, our current president until January 20th, has had an identical stance when it comes to our relationship with Canada. And I'm going to let them do the talking, because once you see what they have to say consistently, and I'm going to leave a couple out just so that this video isn't so long, but I'll capture most presidents from then until now, you will see that what Donald Trump is doing is a complete outlier. It's antithetical to our historical relationship with our best friend and neighbor. It is antithetical to who we are as a people. And I think it's really time to bring that home. I'm taking presidents from Democrats to Republicans, from FDR to Ronald Reagan. And please just stick with me and hear what they have to say. And then I'm going to ask you at the end to engage in some critical thinking and maybe contact your congressperson or senator, because this can't stand. We cannot do this. Okay, my friends? Please stick with me to the end. If you like this content and are so inclined, please hit a like and subscribe, and I will see you on the flip side. Thank you.
My friends and neighbors of Canada, frank dealing, cooperation, and a spirit of give and take between nations is more important than ever before. The United States and Canada, and indeed all parts of the British Empire, share a democratic form of government which comes to us from common sources. We are so accustomed to the undefended boundary, 3,000 miles long, that we are inclined perhaps to minimize its vast importance, not only to our own continuing relations, but also to the example which it sets to the other nations of the world.
Sorry about the roughness of that FDR clip, but as you will see, some of the older clips are a little bit rough. And also, as you will see, some of these presidents that speak to Canadians and in state visits to Canada and about Canada have varying degrees of eloquency and varying degrees of humor, but you're going to hear a common theme. You're going to hear a common theme about friendship, about mutual respect, and about respecting each other's sovereignty.
We stand together at a pivotal point in history. All that we Canadians and Americans and those who went before us have built, all that we believe in, is challenged as it has never been challenged before. The new horizons of competition range from the polar areas and extend to the infinity of outer space. It is for us, all of us, to bring to the challenge a response worthy of ourselves and of our two nations. As we do, we shall know the satisfaction of having built in friendship a safer and ampler home here on the earth for this generation and those that shall come after us.
By the way, what he was talking about in that speech was addressing certain trade concerns between Canada and the United States that could be solved with mutual respect and fair dealing.
Geography has made us neighbors. History has made us friends. Economics has made us partners.
and necessity has made us allies. Those whom nature has so joined together, let no man put asunder. The free world's cause is strengthened because it is just, but it is strengthened even more by the dedicated efforts of free men and free nations. As the great parliamentarian Edmund Burke said, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And that, in essence, is why I am here today. This trip is more than a consultation, more than a goodwill visit. It is an act of faith, faith in your country, in your leaders, faith in the capacity of two great neighbors to meet their common problems, and faith in the cause of freedom in which we are so intimately associated.
I'm not going to even comment on that. It speaks for itself. This next clip is by LBJ speaking to Canadians concerning an energy agreement that had just been entered into in 1964.
More than 3 years ago, President Kennedy came to Canada. He told your Parliament his trip was an act of faith. He said it was faith in our capacity to meet common problems and in our common cause of freedom. Well, my trip today is a fulfillment and a renewal of that act of faith. It is both a resolution of a common problem and a strengthening of freedom's cause.
Next up, Richard Nixon.
It is with very great pride and pleasure that I have signed the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement between Canada and the United States. For this agreement bears witness to all the world of great concerns which unite our two countries. Our common appreciation for the natural heritage which undergirds our national strengths. Our common recognition that problems which cross international boundaries require international solutions, and our common confidence that our traditional relationship can grow to meet new demands.
Now, you'll notice I didn't include Truman. I'm not going to include Ford. I'm not going to include Carter, but I can assure you that the sentiment that all of these other presidents have expressed were shared by them as well. On to Ronald Reagan.
Quebec is one of the most intriguing spots on the continent. Here, New France was founded. Here, French is the language of commerce, the arts, and everyday life. Here, English Canadians and French Canadians came together over a century ago to set the foundations for a country in whose parliament both French and English would be spoken. And here, the citadel and the walls of the old city remind us that Canadians and Americans long ago put aside their differences to become friends. In fact, we're more than friends and neighbors and allies. We are kin, who together have built the most productive relationship between any two countries in the world today. This is my first trip outside the United States since I was sworn into a second term. 4 years ago, I took my first trip as president, and then too, I came to Canada. And this is not a coincidence. For the United States, there is no more important relationship than our tie with Canada. We are each other's most important economic partner. We each play an important role in world affairs. We share a responsibility for the protection of the continent that we peacefully share. We have a joint stake in its environment, and we're partners in space and in the technologies of the future. Between two such independent and sovereign countries, there will always be some differences, as there will always be opportunities for agreement. We can still use what Franklin D. Roosevelt, our last American president to visit Quebec City while serving at the White House, called for between us. He asked for frank dealing, cooperation, and a spirit of give and take. That's precisely what your Prime Minister and I will be engaged in here in Quebec.
This relationship is fundamental. It's fundamental commercially, it's fundamental in the security sense, and we are determined to do our level best to keep it on a high level that it's been on in recent years.
I will just say you've heard a lot of discussion through all of these people about our common ties, about our common history, about our shared culture, about our differences, about sovereignty, about mutual respect for each other's sovereignty, and that our relationship has been mutually beneficial. This is who America is to Canada. This is.
The United States, as many of my predecessors have said, has enjoyed its excellent relationships with a strong and united Canada. But we recognize, just as the Prime Minister said with regard to your relationships to us a moment ago, that your political future is, of course, entirely for you to decide. That's what a democracy is all about.
Thank you for this extraordinary welcome, which tempts me to just shut up and leave. Because they can't get any better than this. So Canada was the very first country that I visited as president. It was in February. It was colder. I was younger. Michelle now refers to my hair as the Great White North. And I was struck then, as I am again today, by the warmth of Canadians. I could not be more honored to be joining you in this historic hall, this Cathedral of Freedom. And we Americans can never say it enough. We could not ask for a better friend or ally than Canada. We could not. That does not mean we don't have our differences. As I understand it, one of the reasons the Queen chose this site for Parliament was that it was a safe distance from America's border. And I admit, in the War of 1812, American troops did some damage to Toronto. I suspect that there were some people up here who didn't mind when the British returned the favor and burned down the White House. In more recent times, however, the only forces crossing our borders are the armies of tourists and business people and families who are shopping and doing business and visiting loved ones. Our only battles take place inside the hockey rink. Even there is an uneasy peace that is maintained. As Americans, we too celebrate the life of Mr. Hockey himself, the late, great Gordie Howe. Just as Canadians can salute American teams for winning more Stanley Cups in the NHL.
With Canadian players.
I told you I should have stopped after the applause. But in a world where too many borders are a source of conflict, our two countries are joined by the longest border of peace on earth. And what makes our relationships so unique is not just proximity. It's our enduring commitment to a set of values. It says no matter who we are, where we come from, what our last names are, what faith we practice, here we can make of our lives what we will. The dreams of generations, immigrants, refugees that were welcomed to these shores. The hope of runaway slaves who went north on an underground railroad. Deep in our history of struggle, said Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Canada was the North Star. The Freedom Road links us together. We're bound as well by the service of those who've defended us at Flanders Field, the beaches of Normandy, the skies of the Balkans, and more recently in the mountains of Afghanistan. And their sacrifice is reflected in the silent rows of Arlington and in the Peace Tower above us. And today we honor those who gave their lives for all of us.
Not last, second to last, is going to be Joe Biden. I'm going to, at the end of this, give Ronald Reagan a second bite at the apple. And I really encourage you to stay for that second Reagan bit. It's from a different visit to Canada, and he speaks to the issue very much currently at hand.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to have the opportunity to uphold a tradition carried out by so many of my predecessors in addressing the hallowed halls of the Canadian democracy, although this is a different hall. You've done a hell of a job here. This is really beautiful. This is a custom that speaks to the closeness of our relationship. Americans and Canadians are two people, two countries, in my view, sharing one heart. It's a personal connection. No two nations on earth are bound by such close ties, friendship, family, commerce, and culture. Our labor unions cross borders. So do our sports leagues. Baseball, basketball, hockey. Listen to this, hockey. I have to say, I like your teams except the Leafs. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why.
Treading on thin ice.
I'll tell you why.
Pun intended.
They beat the Flyers back in January. That's why. And if I didn't see that, I married a Philly girl. If I didn't say that, I'd be sleeping alone, fellas. I like you, but not that much. It can be easy to take a partnership between Canada and the United States as a given. And but when you stop and think about it, it's really a wonder. 5,552-mile-long border, more than 8,800 kilometers, defined by peaceful commerce, trading relationships that measure more than $2.5 billion a day. Every day, hundreds of thousands of people cross the borders going in north and south to work or just to visit, knowing they'll find a warm welcome on the other side of the border. Americans love Canadians, and that's not hyperbole. It's a data-driven fact. Earlier this week, the Gallup poll did a new poll showing American opinions on different countries in the world. This is a fact. Canada ranked at the very top, 88% favorable rating among Americans. Up from 87 the year before. I take credit for that 1 point. But there's a reason for it. The same fundamental aspirations reverberate across both our nations, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, to live in freedom. Not just freedom, but live in freedom with dignity, to relentlessly pursue the possibilities of tomorrow, to leave our children and our grandchildren a future that's better because of our efforts, the people in this room and a similar room in the United States. President Kennedy said, and when he spoke here in 1961, and I quote, he said, "Ours is the unity of equal and independent nations, co-tenants of the same continent, heirs of the same legacy, and fully sovereign associates in the same historic endeavor to preserve freedom for ourselves and for all who wish it, for all who wish it." Through more than a century of that historic endeavor, Canada and the United States have had each other's backs. In war and in peace, we have been the stronghold of liberty, safeguard for the fundamental freedoms that give us our lives, literally, give our lives meaning. We have gladly stepped into the responsibilities of global leadership because we understand all that is at risk for Canadians and Americans alike when freedom is under attack anywhere in the world. Today, our destinies are intertwined and they're inseparable, not because of the inevitability of geography, but because it's a choice we've made again and again. The United States chooses to link our future with Canada because we know that we'll find no better partner. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. No more reliable ally, no more steady friend. And today I say to you and to all the people of Canada that you will always, always be able to count on the United States of America. I guarantee it.
There have been a number of promises made by these presidents. We must keep faith with these promises. All right, please stick around for this last second bite at the apple I'm giving to the late President Ronald Reagan. I think that it is very interesting and very, very relevant to what's going on today.
I remember those days, not so very long after the attack on Pearl Harbor had once again united our two nations in a world conflict, when Winston Churchill stood where I am standing today, on Christmas Day, After an heroic defense by Canadian troops, Hong Kong was captured by the Axis. Manila was soon to be swallowed up as well. But those who might have been expecting a picture of democracy and retreat got something very different from that indomitable spirit. We have not journeyed all this way across the centuries, he said, across the oceans, across the mountains, across the prairies, because we're made of sugar candy. Churchill was speaking of the members of the British Commonwealth, most specifically of the people of Canada. After the Allied victory over the Axis powers, America and Canada combined their efforts to help restore Europe to economic health. Those were golden years of international economic cooperation that saw the creation of GATT, which knocked down the tariff barriers that had so damaged the world economy, the International Monetary Fund, and 30 years ago last month, the creation of the common market. The theme that ran through it all was free and fair trade. Free and fair trade was the lifeblood of a reinvigorated Europe, a revitalized free world that saw a generation of growth unparalleled in history. We must keep these principles fixed in our minds as we move forward. The United States trades more with the province of Ontario alone than with Japan. United States citizens are by far the principal foreign investors in Canada, and Canadians on a per capita basis are even greater investors in our country. This two-way traffic in trade and investment has helped to create new jobs by the millions, expand opportunity for both our peoples, and augment the prosperity of both our nations. Prime Minister Mulroney's proposal would establish the largest free trade area in the world, benefiting not only our two countries, but setting an example of cooperation to all nations that now wrestle against the siren temptation of protectionism. To those who would hunker down behind barriers to fight a destructive and self-defeating round of trade battles, Canada and the United States will show the positive way. We will overcome the impulse of economic isolationism with a brotherly embrace. An embrace it is not too much to hope that may someday extend throughout the Americas and ultimately encompass all free nations. We can look forward to the day when all borders become what the U.S.-Canadian border so long has been, a meeting place rather than a dividing line. We recognize that the issues facing us are many and difficult, and just as this proud Parliament is watching our negotiations, so too is the United States Congress. A comprehensive, balanced agreement that provides open trade and investment on a comprehensive basis, an agreement in which both sides are winners. And on this, the Canadian people and the members of Parliament have my word. Freedom works. The democratic freedoms that secure the God-given rights of man and the economic freedoms that open the door to prosperity, they are the hope, and we trust, the destiny of mankind. So many have come to Canada and the United States in hope. Let us now give that hope to the world. Throughout our history, our two nations have keenly felt our international responsibilities. Instrumental in founding and maintaining the NATO alliance, through cooperative efforts in NORAD, Canada has taken a leading role in defense of the free world. And meanwhile, we have cooperated in extending every effort to lessen the dangers of a nuclear-armed world. The Prime Minister and I also had a full discussion of the Arctic waters issue, and he and I agreed to inject new impetus to the discussions already underway. We are determined to find a solution based on mutual respect for sovereignty and our common security and other interests. Thank you all very much, and God bless you all.
So, to my American brothers and sisters, I'm not here to lecture you. Whether you voted for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, whether you are a Democrat or Republican, what I hope to have accomplished by this, and I know I'm not reaching very many of you, but this is the only platform I have. What I hope to have accomplished by this is to remind you who we are, to remind you why we have the trade relationships that we have, to remind you that we've always respected Canadian sovereignty, to remind you that our trade relationships, our familial ties, our friendship, our undefended border, and by that I don't mean unsecure border. I just mean we're not defending it from each other, that we are peaceful neighbors, that this is who we are, that this is the foundation of a strong, free North America that respects democracy and sovereignty. I know Ronald Reagan is very meaningful to a lot of you. Just remember his words. Every single president, whether Republican or Democrat, from FDR down to Joe Biden, with the exception of one, understands and remembers the history, understands and remembers what Canada has done for us selflessly throughout the years. I'm not going to run through a laundry list. I've discussed it in other videos if you'd like to see them. I just urge you to look on your own. And to anyone who is believing what's out there in certain media quarters, that the majority of Canadians want to become the 51st state, I tell you, look that up independently. Look at Canadian news sources. It's just not true. Yes, there's a small contingent, maybe around 13%, if polling numbers are right, are interested of exploring the possibility of what would that mean? Would they have to give up their health care? Would they have to give up their subsidized higher education? You know, what would that mean? But the notion that they want it, they do not want it. And they will do whatever it takes to defend their sovereignty and to defend themselves. You know, I'm reminded by lyrics in the Canadian national anthem. The true north, strong and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. They will live up to those lyrics. I promise you they will. We will find ourselves in a mutually destructive trade war, and we will become the world's pariah. It is not in our best interest to do this to our closest friend and ally. It is not, I promise you. But don't take my word for it. Let us not break faith with the promises made by all of our presidents, from FDR down to Joe Biden, including the likes of Ronald Reagan, George Bush, Richard Nixon, and certainly Dwight Eisenhower. Okay? Let us remember. Talk to your I know this is not the most important thing in your lives, but it is important. And it has a greater impact on all of North America and on people who live in the United States than you think. So, you know, please contact your congressperson, contact your senator, do whatever we can to make sure that we don't destroy this relationship. Okay? All right. And to my Canadian friends and cousins out there, we love and appreciate you. Many of us are here for you and support you and are doing what we can. All right, my friends, I will see you all soon, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Take care.